Okay, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Integration Joint Board. I rule that under Standing Orders 5.6 and 5.81, this meeting is held by remote participation due to current restrictions and the impact on attendance at meetings of the IJB. Whilst the public are excluded from attendance at this meeting under the terms of the Coronavirus Scotland Act 2020, members of the local media are in attendance via remote link. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be published online for public access after the meeting. Can all participants online please switch off their cameras and mute microphones when not speaking? And if you need to speak on any point, please use the raise hand function in Teams or indicate your wish to speak by signalling on your camera or taking your microphone off mute. Officers are reminded to follow the protocols that have been separately issued with regard to their participation. And before we start the meeting, can I ask the committee officer to do a roll call for members to indicate they are present?
Good afternoon. Mr. Carroll.
Present.
Mrs. Cornick.
Present.
Mr. Fraser.
Hello.
Ms. Haswell.
Present.
Mrs. MacDonald.
Present.
Mr. McGregor.
Present.
And the non-voting members, Mr. Chittick.
Present.
Mr. Williamson.
Present.
Ms. Morgan.
Present.
Dr. Evans.
Present. Good afternoon.
I have apologies from Dr. Einerson and Ms. Watson. Ms. Gens.
Present.
Mr. Sandilands. I don't see Mr. Sandilands present. I have apologies for lateness from Mrs. Tulloch. Mr. Guyan. Mr. Guyan, I think, is present. Yes, he is. Dr. Laidlaw.
Hello, yes, present.
Ms. Campbell.
Present.
And Mrs. McFarlane. I think Mrs. McFarlane was present.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. That's everyone.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Liesl. Okay, we've done apologies. Do we have any declarations of interest, members? I'll just pause for a moment to see if anybody raises their hand virtually or in the room. No? Okay, we'll move on to the agenda. So we've got item 1 on our agenda is the unaudited accounts, and Carl is presenting on that one.
Okay, thanks. So this is the unaudited IJB annual accounts for the financial year 2021. They've been prepared in line with the latest guidance and legislation. The audit committee's already considered the accounts this morning. They had no concerns, so I'm going to keep this very brief because conscious it's a lengthy agenda today. So the unaudited accounts will go to Deloitte now for the audit process, and then we'll come back to the IJB audit committee and IJB on 30th September, along with the final audit report. So the management commentary starting on page 11 of the pack provides an overview of the in-year performance and a summary of the financial position as at the end of March 21. The performance and operational review sections are aligned to the annual performance report that's going up to the IJB later on in the agenda. So that'll actually have more detail. This section aims to tell the story of the overall in-year performance, which has been reasonably positive considering the challenges posed by COVID-19. Can you look at the table at the top of page 17, please? Because that's the key financial entries for the year. Line 1 is the final budgets. Line 2 is the cost that IJB delegated services. Line 3 is the surplus and deficit. You see the council's arm of the budget's underspent by just over $1 million. The NHS arm is overspent by just over $1 million. So we're almost balanced as far as IJB delegated services goes. Next two lines represent the management costs such as audit fee, insurance and members' expenses. And then row 6 shows you the fortuitous underspent going back to the council and the NHS making a one-off top-up payment of 2.2 million. That's to balance the NHS arm, plus it's the unused IJB funding allocations being passed through to reserves. So it leaves the IJB with a surplus at year end at just over 1.2 million. The reasons for the significant budget variance is included at pages 18 to 22. Again, I'm not going to go through them in any detail because it's the same themes as we're well aware of. It's temporary staffing costs. The IJB has ended the year with this 1.2 million surplus. It's made up of three different elements, this surplus. So it's 92,000, it's unspent additionality funding. So that can be added to the free reserve and can be used in line with the strategic plan and the reserves policy. There's NHS specific allocations of 1.4 million that was passed to the IJB at year end, and that'll go in as earmarked reserves, and that needs to be used in line with the government's intentions. And then there's been an in-year draw on reserves of 301,000 to fund various projects. So the 1.2 million added to the carry forward reserve of 978,000 means that the IJB ends the year with a £2.2 million reserve. Just over £500,000 of that is free, so that can be used to help with a redesign. I just need to stress that we need to invest that in non-recurrent costs. We can't employ permanent staff, for example, with that, but it might be helpful for to kind of pump prime some of the redesign programs that we're going to be coming with. And then page 25 is the annual governance statement, and the IJB is being asked to approve this today. This is just the this needs to be signed by the chair and the chief officer to confirm they're satisfied with IJB's governance arrangements and systems of internal control, and that has been informed by internal audit as well. And yeah, just like to report, there's no significant concerns around these arrangements, so I would recommend approval of this statement. The remainder of the accounts is just the technical accounting requirements such as remuneration report, statement of responsibilities, auditor's report, which will be populated following the audit, and the primary financial statements and notes. So that's all I want to say about this, and happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Carl. And this was at the IJB Audit Committee, as you said earlier today. So maybe just go across to Lincoln and maybe just give us a brief update on how that went so that we're not repeating questions.
Thanks, Chair. It was my first effort at chairing the IJB audit, so that was a challenge in itself. But no, there were no significant issues brought up in the report, and I think there's certainly conversations around the ongoing costs and how, you know, for staffing that we're unable to sort of manage at the moment because it's a nationwide problem. So that's something that there was a little bit of discussion around, and issues for NHS, SIC, and I guess lots of other areas as well. That's probably something for the Scottish Government to look at as well, how they could fund those things. But yeah, that's really all that. I mean, it's a good report, and it's always good to have a small surplus.
That's super. Thanks very much for that. I'll open up for questions. If anybody has any questions on this item, just give it a moment so anybody can raise their hands. No questions in the room, and I don't see any hands going up online. So just move on to comments. So I'll just maybe start us off. I think, as Carl said, there's no surprises in this report. We're all aware of the challenges that we face, particularly recruitment challenges, which affects all areas of our services. We've received additional funding from the Scottish Government to meet additional COVID costs, which has been vital in these difficult times. But we do need to be mindful that our medium-term financial plan shows a significant deficit going forward. So there does need to be a focus on how we close this gap, whilst also ensuring the best outcomes for our community. I would just like to pass on my thanks to all of the staff across the IJB for their input into the preparation of these accounts, and to all the budget managers and support staff who've ensured delivery of the outcomes of the strategic commissioning plan within the financial resources available. So I think although we're maybe not spending a huge amount of time over these accounts today, there's a lot of work that's gone into it, so we do recognise that, so thank you. Anybody got any further comments? No, I'm not seeing anybody come in. So we've been asked to consider the accounts at 1.1 and approve the annual governance statement. Are we happy to do that? Yeah. Yeah, I don't see
Yes.
anybody. Otherwise, that's fine. Okay, that's super. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 2, which is the financial monitoring report to the 31st of March 2021, and that's Carl again.
Thank you. So this is the management accounts for the year end at 31st of March 21. The information in here is consistent with what's already been reported in the IJB's unaudited accounts. So I'm not going to go through this in any great detail. The integration scheme requires us to present management accounts quarterly, so that's why there is this summary report going up at this point. It does contain some additional information in the appendices, such as financial variances by surface area, detailed movements in IJB reserves, and significant budget movements during the year. So again, I just want to keep that very brief and happy to take any questions on this one.
Thanks very much, Carl. Any questions on this, members?
It's also been an audit committee, sorry.
Okay. Do you want to come in, Lincoln, and give us an update from how this went at audit committee?
Can do, yeah. No, again, it was received at the audit committee, and yeah, there was nothing of any major surprise in there either. So, and no real discussion either.
Okay, thank you. I think most of the information's already been considered in the previous paper, so I wouldn't expect any major questions at this one. Do we have any comments? No? No, not seeing any. Oh, sorry, Jane, go ahead.
Sorry, maybe a bit ahead. It was just to say that as this has been to the governance committee of the audit before it's come forward, then I'm happy to support that and the recommendation in the paper.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Is anybody otherwise minded, or are we happy to note the management accounts for the year end 31st of March 2021? Yeah, I'll take that as we're happy to do so. Okay, if we move on to agenda item 3, and it's the interim external audit report, and I believe Connor Healy is here to present this report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report also went to the audit committee. Just to confirm, there were no comments or queries on the internal report at the audit earlier. It would be a bit of deja vu for those who did attend the committee slightly earlier, so apologies for that. This is the year 5 report you will have received on the wider audit dimension, which is a core part of the audit that we deliver. It will be the last audit you receive in terms of the report on this, because next year the council will receive a best value assurance report, and the IJB will cover it as part of that. So we will be unable to issue an interim report because it essentially preempts some of the findings of the best value report. So all of our findings next year will come in a final report, and the IJB will also be covered in the best value report, which will come out towards the back end of next year. COVID obviously impacted throughout the year, and that's been considered throughout our report. I think in terms of where we are, the context is quite important. There's 6 recommendations this year, which is down from 16 in 2018-19, which the last we did a proper detailed look at the wider scope, and from 14 in 2017-18. The rate of implementation of audit recommendations has increased from 19% last year to 71% this year. So that's a welcome improvement. In terms of the overall conclusions, in terms of financial management, there is effective financial planning and financial management in place with real improvements in the year, especially in the financial monitoring reports. The finance function does operate effectively, although given the increasing workloads across NHS and social care, consideration should be given to the sustainability of resourcing of the finance function as it goes forward. In terms of financial sustainability, we are satisfied that short-term balance can be achieved next year, although longer-term sustainability remains a risk, as the IJB is well aware, and that is a national issue. There have been improvements in the year, for example, in setting out what the vision looks like over the medium term by revising the MTFP. The IJB does not think that the 3% savings targets embedded in the MTFP is realistic over the longer term. However, it has done insufficient work for us to be able to review whether or not we agree with that conclusion. So we had discussion with managers that that's something they should look at doing over the next year, so we can review that and come to a similar conclusion potentially. In terms of further improvements could be made by enhancing the board involvement in the budget setting process and formalising community and stakeholder engagement in that process. For governance and transparency, there is strong leadership in place, and there's a clear commitment to openness and transparency within the IJB, which is welcome. We note significant improvements in governance in the year and welcome progress in ensuring compliance with the IJB's governing legislation. Further improvements could be made in the IJB specific board member development. For value for money, there is a robust performance management framework in place. Improvements in performance scrutiny could be achieved by detailed consideration of performance at a committee rather than the board level, which we do see increasingly across Scotland. The key message that we take away from this report is that increasingly the IJB in Shetland is diverging from developing practice across Scotland. For example, having its own specific finance capacity, its own MTFP, which is not reliant on the Council NHS, its own transformation strategy, its own workforce plan, which is a requirement by 2022, its own website, and so on. That may be appropriate, but if that divergence continues, it will need to be considered by the IJB that whether it's appropriate over the longer term, especially in light of the Feely report and the government intention to implement the recommendations within that. Overall, however, the report should be seen as a positive report. The IJB has delivered improvements in key areas during what has been an exceptional year, and the IJB does have sufficient arrangements in place to secure best value, and that has a clear understanding of areas that require further improvement. Happy to take any questions you may have on the report.
Thanks very much for that, Connor. Okay, do we have any questions on this report? I'll give a moment for anybody to get their hands up. I'll maybe start with a question from me. It's maybe a question that's not that easy to answer, but I'll answer it anyway. So financial sustainability is a key area of concern within this report. And whilst I do recognise the need to be financially sustainable, there is a mention of the need to link outcomes closer with the budget setting process. And we make choices on how we spend our resources, and we have a higher cost due to some of the models of care that we use. And the scale has an impact on costs because we provide really good services. And I understand the need to be focused on financial sustainability, but when costs are increasing but funding isn't, we're left with very little option of how we tackle that. So my question to you is, how much of a priority is it to you from an audit perspective to look at the outcomes, or are you more focused on the finance?
That's a really good question. I would say we're focused more on neither, but on both. And the reason for that is that the Scottish Government has intimated that over the medium term, it is going to link funding to outcomes. So if we don't focus on outcomes, essentially that will impact on sustainability and vice versa. So we have to look at both. They're both equally important. I think what we've recommended to management, we've had some useful discussions with management on this during the year, is further work needs to be done in setting out, okay, are you doing everything as efficiently and as effectively as you possibly could? Because what we can then say at that point is we could make a conclusion that there are no further savings for you to make here without impacting on the outcomes which you are trying to deliver, without being unable to deliver your priorities. And we have done that at other bodies. We have said that there's simply nothing else this body can do. It needs more funding if it wants to deliver this. And we wouldn't shy away from making that conclusion. The issue is that within Shetland, the IJB, the level of work that needs to go into kind of determining that and showing that hasn't yet been done. So that's a piece of work we recommend that management look to do over next year, so that we could then come to a conclusion on whether or not actually further savings are achievable or whether you just need more funding.
Thanks very much for that answer, Connor. So kind of what I'm hearing from that is that we just have to be maybe better at telling the story of what we do and how we do it. Because it's not actually that we're not providing good outcomes, because I really think we are. And it's about recognising that they do come at a cost. And I think we just maybe need to be better at telling that story. But anybody else got any questions? No, I'm not getting off lightly today, Connor. Okay, if we've got no questions, I'll maybe get Lincoln to come in because this came to the audit committee earlier. So maybe if you want to give us a little update of any discussion that you had.
Connor got off very lightly in the audit meeting. Actually, there were no questions, but obviously the divergence that Connor spoke about was something nice, but we need to look at obviously with the Feely report. I think we're doing that. We're going to be doing all that anyway, so that will become part of the conversation. But I agree, Emma, the issue around funding and, you know, extra funding, we need to be better at showing off what we do, which is something that we don't like to do in Shetland. But I think we, you know, actually painting a picture for the Scottish Government is really important at this stage, especially with all the changes that are coming. So I agree totally with your comments.
Thank you very much. And do we have anybody else who wants to make any comments on this? Jane?
Thank you. Sorry, couldn't find the right button. I pick up your points, and I think the Feely does give us a common purpose. I think it is a challenge, and I know that the Scottish Government is looking at the whole procurement and how do we actually look at what matters to you and look at how the actual outcomes are not just involving people, but are driven by those outcomes. So I think there's a significant change in the narrative coming from Feely around the outcomes, but what that really means. And I think it's that, are we ahead of that curve in Shetland? I think it adds to the mix of what you're highlighting about the divergence. And I think that we have absolutely started those conversations and are really embedding what matters to you into our processes. So I'm just adding that to the mix, that yes, that there is a divergence, but I think quality is determined by what matters to you, and those actually changing the way that budgeting comes in to that mix. So I think that's something for the future, and look forward to audit reports that also look at that and our conversations around that moving forward. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane. Yeah, I don't see any other hands up. I think this has been a really positive audit report, so I really welcome this today. I think the report does highlight how effective this IJB is, particularly in light of the recent times we've been operating in. There's been some significant progress in aligning the strategic commissioning plan, the directions, the medium-term financial plan. Further reports on our agenda today show the positive changes that have been made in planning and performance and how we look at those in a more joined-up way. I would agree that we do need to look further ahead on how we shape plans for transformational change and ensure that we take the community with us on that journey. So there is learning in there, but ultimately I think it is a really positive report, and I think it's a credit to all the staff and everybody we have working within our services. So thank you very much for that. And we're being asked, no? Are we all happy to note? Yeah. Nobody else wants to come in on this one? Did you want to say anything, Brian?
No, Chair.
Is that okay? Okay, so we'll move on to item 4, which is the Health and Social Care Partnership Annual Performance Report, and Brian's presenting on that one. You want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Like the external auditor's report, this is also the 5th time that the annual performance reports come to board. The key outcomes from our annual performance reports to describe key work that we've been undertaking and key achievements for the Health and Social Care Partnership, but also to acknowledge the challenges we've had in delivering these services, especially in the last year due to managing a pandemic as well. But I think also it's important that we highlight how we've adapted and learned in response to this challenge. And another outcome is to describe the progress of the Health and Social Care Partnership in delivering our strategic priorities as a board and demonstrate what this has meant for all our stakeholders. The report has also given a little insight in the development of the plan on a page for future work going forward as well. So it's not just retrospective, it's also giving a little insight into what's coming up as well. The report does align with the performance management framework and supports the move, as we've already discussed, toward outcome-focused reporting, whilst reporting performance against the suite of national and local indicators. And we've tried to highlight with the outcome-focused reporting with several case studies that are within the report, but also attached as appendices to the report. The report also includes a financial review, which we've already been discussed and covered in the agenda items earlier. And with the time constraints inside the report, I think I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Thanks very much, Brian. I'll open it up for questions. Any questions, members? Give people a moment. Put their hands up? No, everybody's been very well behaved today. No, I don't see any questions on that one. Okay, well, I'll open it up for comments. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make on item 4? Again, I'm not, oh, Jane.
Thank you. Just to say that bit of a preview for the commissioning plan is really good to get a feel for that as it's coming through, and I think the 1-page plan is really a good way to move forward, and that was my only comment on that. But yeah, echo Brian's comments about how much has been achieved.
Yeah, very much. I think it's really welcome, this report today, and I really welcome the case studies in it. I think it's an effective way of highlighting areas and showcasing the varied work of the Health and Care Partnership. I particularly like page 116 of the pack, where it highlights some of the key achievements. And I would again like to express my gratitude to all the staff who've had such a can-do attitude over this last 16 months. I think there's much to celebrate within this document and much we can learn from going forward. So I am happy to approve the annual performance report. Are we all happy to do so? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. We will move on to agenda item 5, which is the planning and performance update. And I believe Hazel Sutherland is presenting on that one.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the Q4 performance report, and it continues our ambition to move towards a more outcomes-focused approach for reporting on our performance indicators. So there's possibly 4 key issues that I would just like to outline before welcoming question and comments on what we present before you today. The first one is to do with the needs assessment and earlier conversations about developing a plan on a page. So recently the clinical and care strategy work has been updated, which is also later on the agenda today. And I just wanted to acknowledge at this stage that there's really good alignment between the current strategic plan as it exists and the draft clinical and care strategy. And moving forward, we can see a way where we would be able to combine all the common elements into one common plan, and then acknowledge the differences in terms of where the clinical and care strategy ticks us off more into health land in terms of specialist health services, the hospital and child health, and then topped and tailed in terms of the strategic plan on our work with social work, community care and housing and supported housing. So it's a lovely stage to be at in terms of our approach to planning and how we may be able to align that work streams. The second area I just wanted to touch on was the work that we've done with the support of Brian and Joe Robinson on the review of the performance indicators, where we have had detailed discussions with each of the managers on which performance indicators were coming before the board. We've taken a fresh look at those, and we've made some suggestions for you today at paragraph 2.3.4, where we feel that they could actually be removed from the performance indicator report. They will still be held elsewhere and still be accessible, but the essence of our approach was that they were not adding to your knowledge on outcomes. They were there for other reasons and can safely be removed from the formal reports so long as certain sort of fallback arrangements were put in place. Also to share with you that these reports were taken through the strategic planning group, and we had a good discussion there in terms of what that would mean and what the balance would be. And one particular comment was to do with not losing sight of how we use our care homes and what they're used for. And I think that generally the strategic planning group was able to be reassured through the chief officer and others that actually that work would be strengthened through shifting the balance of care. So it wasn't that we were going to lose something, it was actually that work needed further development. There were other areas where we felt that the performance indicators as presented, they were really just used as a proxy for something that was much more complicated. If I use the examples of oral health, pharmacy and prescribing, and adult mental health, the suite of outcome indicators around those particular performance indicators are strong in terms of comparison with national arrangements and also with peer group comparisons. And we think that what would be beneficial to the IJB there would be a more detailed report telling the whole story rather than relying on some single or several performance indicators that then have to be explained in the context of a much wider and more complex situation. And just finally, as already been mentioned by the chair, we're starting to introduce the case studies. We have 4 before you today, and I hope that you find that helpful in terms of explaining how we add value. So back to the conversation earlier about being clearer about the value that goes in to achieving outcomes and that approach. These are a work in progress, and I wanted to thank the staff that had been willing to put themselves forward as guinea pigs at this particular stage, but to say that the approach has been well received by staff, and we have a list of people who are willing to present case studies to future meetings. So this is a work in progress at this stage. So I hope that's helpful by way of an introduction to explain what the report is seeking to do, and we'll welcome your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Hazel. I'll open up for questions. Natasha.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Hazel, for explaining all of that. I have one comment and one question. The first is the comment around about at 1.1b of the cover sheet, we're asked to give a preference about how we would deal with these 24 operational performance indicators and whether they would be available through a public reporting tool. And I feel that as an IJB, we've shown a very strong commitment towards transparency. So I would certainly move that these are made available by a public reporting tool so that they can be accessed by the public. And I just wanted to explore further around 2.3.6 of the cover sheet, and that is the deep dive approach that you mentioned in regard to pharmacy, mental health, and there was a third one that escapes my mind right now. I just wanted to explore that further because the suggestion is that we would have this deep dive approach maybe once or twice a year in relation to these services. And I'm just thinking with the IJB having quite a large focus on mental health and obviously the improvements that are required around that service, it would concern me to only see a deep dive once or twice a year in regard to that. So I just wondered if you might just be able to give us a little bit more information about what was behind that thought process, and also is there other information that we would receive during the year around the adult mental health services?
Okay, Hazel, do you want to answer some of that? Somebody else might want to come in and answer some of it as well. But if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. That's a really useful observation to not lose sight of these key policy areas during the year. So I think we should come back with some proposals on that. So perhaps what we could do was complement I'll just going to call it an annual report, the annual report type approach on the detailed service areas. Then we could think about what information would be able to be provided on a more regular basis, as you say, on these open platforms, so that we don't lose sight of it as we go through the year. That's a really good point. We don't want to take things away for you, but we just want it to be to use indicators that are useful to you in terms of monitoring trends, understanding where investments need to be made, and aligning that, as you've said before, to any improvement action plan. So can I take that one away and just have a think about it? But as I say, we don't want to take good information away for you, quite the opposite. Thank you.
Thanks. Hazel, do you want to come back on that at all, Natasha?
Just to say thanks, Hazel. That's a really good suggestion, and we look forward to that information coming back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Lynn next.
Thank you, Chair. Just in respect of the case studies that's been recently provided in part of the performance report and also within the annual report. My apologies for coming in late. I've missed maybe some of the initial discussions, but it was just really to highlight that we'd invited Hazel Sutherland to come to our third sector forum. And certainly kind of discuss obviously that increased partnership work and sharing of information. And I mean, the case study is always a really good example of putting the meat on the bones, as it were, alongside all the statistical information. And there was certainly an appetite and an openness and a welcome for certain charities within the third sector to be able to be sharing case studies to help to complement the performance report. So we'll be certainly keeping in close links within Hazel to look at sharing that, more so you can have that third sector kind of presence within the reporting.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much for that, Lynn. And I think that's important as well. We're not doing this in isolation and we need to work with people. So it'll be really good to have those case studies in as well. Any further questions, anybody? Jane?
Thank you. There's buttons. Yes, Hazel, it was thank you for that overview, and I absolutely agree with the whole merging, and you explained it really, really well, and gave us that overview. And the as being chair of the clinical care and strategy review, it was having that library of those comments is so important that are fed into the whole consultation process. And I think that that's a similar suggestion that you're talking about, having that library of comments, because when people take time out to actually provide us with comments, it's very, very important that they see how that feeds into our decision-making process within the IJB. So I do support what you're aiming at there. And I think we do have to keep that focus on the what matters to you. And I think that's a useful term across when we're thinking about the way that we change our reporting. It's also that what matters to you, and as the people that we serve, are they seeing what matters to them in our reporting? So I welcome that. And through the case studies, we're able to hear people's actual comments. That's coming very clearly. And I think the people who are lining up, as you said, for future case studies, that involvement of the voice of the actual people, I think that's such a strong actual quote from individuals as well. If that's a possibility to include, I think that really strengthens the visibility of how important we take people's feedback, but more importantly, the co-production that we're all aiming for. So thank you, Hazel, and I really see how we're moving forward on this, and it's great to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Hazel, did you want to come back in?
I also wanted to share an observation that we shouldn't be scared of using the case studies to tell when things went wrong, so that they're really seen as a learning opportunity. So they're not just always positive focus, but we really give balance to that in terms of being open to learn from the stories they tell as well. I'd forgotten to say that, but Jane's comments had reminded me that was an important part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come back in, Jane?
Yes, just to say, and I think that fills carries on to your, I can't remember if it was in this one or the other one, I'm having difficulty with the papers today, but where you did that, you said we did. And I think that what you're saying there is when that comes through in the case studies, it's when people give us comments, we are showing what we did with those comments. So I agree, it's the learning and then showing where that learning has had an impact on services for other people. Thank you.
Thank you. But Lincoln next.
Thanks, Chair. Really helpful, Hazel, and obviously we've had this discussion already in the third sector, so we kind of feel we have a fair bit of information. I guess the thing for me is around us looking wider as well when we're talking about the Feely report, also the promise for which is the report for young people leaving care, and sort of looking at how that fits in amongst all that, and whether we're covering things. I think we spoke at the last third sector forum about supported accommodation for young people leaving care that's more appropriate for their needs and things, and I see about supportive sort of accommodation being there, but looking more specifically around what their needs are, and again the case studies, usually delivering case studies to funders, people like that, and it does really, when you're the person on the other side, it makes you more aware of what people are doing and how that's impacting on people's lives. So that's been really interesting to see that side of it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Got Denise next.
Thank you, Chair. It's just in relation to Lincoln's note about the promise, and just to inform the board that the promise is being addressed by Children's Services and the reports will go through Educational Families Committee. But if the third sector forum would like an update periodically, then I can arrange for that to happen. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Denise. That's really helpful. Okay, do we have any further questions or any comments on this one, members? No? Everybody's quite happy. I think it really does help to tell the story that the services have and outcomes for people in our community. When we have case studies like this, it makes it much more real. And ultimately, that's why we're all sitting here today, is to help improve the lives of people that live here. And I think you can do that in a much better way when you're looking at people rather than looking at statistics. So I really do welcome it. And I think this has shown the promise of lots of good things to come. So I am happy at 1.1. Are we all happy to note the activity? And are we happy to agree to no longer include their performance indicators, but making sure that they are still available for people to get? And we're all happily commented on any issues. So are we all happy with all that? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that today, Hazel. Okay, so now we move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is clinical and care strategies. John, did you want to come in on that point?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Before we embark upon agenda item 6, I noticed that we've been asked not only to note but support what is a significant document that will shape clinical and care strategy for the next 10 years. I feel it will be a disservice to the community not to give it the attention it deserves, and actually a discourtesy to the authors of this significant piece of work not to give it the due attention it deserves. Now, we only received this report yesterday afternoon, and therefore I would propose that its consideration be deferred to a future date, as I can't personally, in good conscience, confirm support for a strategy that I've not had time to consider. So I would move, Chair, that the consideration of this report be deferred until a future date.
Okay, does anybody would second that? Robbie?
Happy to second with the proviso that can I ask, if that's in order, is this going to hold up the report elsewhere in any way?
Brian, would you like to come in on that point?
Yeah, just for a minute to maybe explain the delay and the late issue of this report and it being added to the papers late was the fact that the time frame to accept comments from the public consultation on the draft to then have those formulated into the final draft of the report meant that it had breached the week clearance time for the report to be submitted in time. So that explains why it came to board late as additional paper. From what I'm reading into it, with the fact that we're being asked to support the report, I don't think there will be any significant impact on the report. From an NHS Shetland perspective of its progression to the next stages, because it is formulating part of that strategic assessment in the next stage of their clinical care strategy stroke, where we're going to in the future as well. So I don't think there's any significant impact of it being held over to the September IJB. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Robbie?
In that case, I'm happy to give an unqualified second to Councillor Fraser's suggestion.
Okay, thank you. I've got Jane. Jane?
Just to inform the board that this came in front of the Joint Governance Committee of the IJB and the Health Board, of which I am chair, and had the discussion there. So the Joint Governance Group has supported this strategy, and I think it's important that the board know that was has been approved, and that's a joint IJB and NHS committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is anybody otherwise minded then if we choose to bring this back at the September meeting, bearing in mind it won't have an impact on any future use of this strategy by the NHS? I absolutely appreciate that the delays happen, and I appreciate that, but I also appreciate John's comments that we did get it quite late in the day yesterday and everybody has quite busy schedules, and I think it is better to have read something properly before you are giving it your support. So I'm happy to hold it over to the next meeting if everybody's okay with that. I'll give everybody a moment to see if anybody has any other views. No? Okay. Well, we'll move on to agenda item 7 then, which is the IJB Business Programme and Action Tracker, and that is Brian.
Thank you, Chair. This is the routine activity and business programme for the board coming forward and outlining future meetings and the business that needs to be conducted. It's probably September we need to be focusing on as the next meeting, because we've just added another held over report going to that meeting, as well as there was an aspiration to take the joint workforce plan to board at that stage as well. And we also have some outstanding activity with regards to strategic planning group review of terms of reference. And a board is happy. I think we need to start the engagement and participation strategy, and there have been an aim to bring a framework paper to board at that stage in September to outline how we're going to do that and who we're going to engage with and what stakeholder forum will be. So the board will have sort of input into that strategy and the direction of travel of that and move that forward. Also discussed at Audit Committee today was the risk register, and the risk strategy have been indicated as not having been reviewed since 2015. So there's an aim to do that as a priority piece of work within the governance structure, and we were considering whether it would link in with September, but I'm thinking now that would probably need a little bit more time to review the strategy. So what was suggested to Audit Committee was that in their meeting in August, we present the risk register as it is in its current format, and then we would aim in November to take a draft strategy to Audit Committee for review to then bring for ratification to through IJB in December, and that would hopefully link in with some of the audit recommendations about reviewing that risk register and risk strategy. So put that forward to you, Chair, and the board as well, whether that seems to be a way forward with respect to that particular piece of business. But also, I'm wondering if we need to consider additional meeting capacity to deal with some of the business. And also, by September, we would hope that we've had communication on the independent care review, and maybe what activity that's going to generate as well. So I would think that the board will want to have some consideration of anything that comes out there as well in a timely manner. So it links into that. Do we need some extra meeting capacity in around that September or autumn kind of period?
Thanks very much, Brian. Looking at this, the planned business still to be scheduled and some of the things that you've mentioned already that's still to come up, I would suggest that we need to be finding a date for an additional meeting between the September and the December meeting. So I think it would be beneficial if we could get dates in the diary soon for that, because it's better to have a meeting there. I'm sure we'll always fill it with something.
January.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to support what you and Brian have just said and gently make the suggestion of, when we look at my diary, that the meeting in September is 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock. Is there, I know people have busy diaries, but is there not mileage in blocking off a little more time? And in the light of Councillor Fraser's move to defer an item of business today, you know, I'm just very concerned that there's going to be a backlog of work. So I know I'm straying into management issues, but I just wondered if consideration could be given to that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point, and I think if we do find another date, that would help clear up some of this planned business and would help our agendas not be so difficult to manage. So I would suggest that's what we do, is just find another date between my suggestion. Has anybody else got any questions on the business programme? No, is everybody happy? Jane?
I'm picking up on Robbie's point, and I personally would be happy to extend that meeting with time, if that meant that we didn't have a backlog of business. Equally, I'm happy for that extension plus another meeting if that is required, but I do support Robbie's suggestion there as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would need to be both. Looking at the things that we still have to schedule, I think we'd probably still need an additional meeting, just to give us the ability to consider things in a proper manner. Lincoln?
Thanks, Chair. I agree with Robbie and Jane on that point, and happy to do that. Just in terms of the risk register, that was agreed at the audit meeting. We were happy for Brian to go away and come back in August, and then come with a draft in November to audit. So happy to support that as well.
Okay, thank you. John?
Thanks very much. And agree with everything that's been said. Extend that meeting if at all possible, find another date. But actually, moreover than that, may I make a suggestion that there's no meetings from the 9th of December until the 17th of February. would it be worth at this time putting in just a speculative date, just with no agenda items as yet, but just as a window in the diary that's blocked off in order that if any additional items come along in the interim, just that people have that particular diary date clear for I suppose, mop up, you would say.
Brian, do you want to come in on that?
The problem, I think, with committee activity, board activity in January is the clearance time, just post-Christmas and New Year vacation. So I'm happy if Chair's happy and the board's happy to take that away and maybe have that conversation with the committee officers, just to see what is in the art of the possible and what is realistic timing to get papers drafted and through the clearance process and see whether there would be scope of getting a date. What often happens is that it's close to that 17th meeting with them, especially the officers, to be preparing two sets of reports in that close committee cycle. So I'm very happy to take that away and just see what is in the art of possible.
It's my idea is more designed to try and help you. It's just in your officers if they need to bring things forward.
Carol, did you want to come in on that point?
No, it was something else. It was just a minor point about the IJB reserves policy. Is on the agenda for the 9th of September. IJB reserves policy and the IJB financial regulations is both going up to the IJB audit committee in August. So I don't know if it needs to go up here as well. Just a minor thing.
Okay. Do you want to come in on that, Brian?
I was going to say, I think with certainly the reserve policy, I think it would be good for board to see that, you know, even if it's a draft, maybe going through to audit committee for them to come to board. I think that would be really useful, but especially the amount we're holding in the reserve, what's earmarked, what's not. I think if sort of members have, board members have that kind of clarity of what's proposed as a framework and a policy moving forward, I think that would be to be tabled and reported to board.
Yes. Okay, and do we have any comments or questions? Did you want to come back, Al? Sorry.
No, that's fair enough. I just thought we'd maybe try and avoid duplication because the agenda is so busy, but that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions on the action tracker?
It's fine. It's green in the fact that we've been sort of going through the actions and taking them off. I think today we'll generate some more actions, but there's nothing sort of concern that we're not addressing on the action tracker.
Okay. Well, I think if we've finished on that, nobody's got any further questions or comments on it, then that concludes the business for today. And our next meeting, as we've said, is not until the 9th of September. So I would just like to take this opportunity to wish everybody a nice time over the summer. I know a lot of our staff have been working incredibly hard over this past period, and I do hope that you manage to take some time off over the summer. And hopefully we'll get some nicer weather than we're having today, so you can enjoy it. But I do hope that some of our teams do manage to get a rest, because it has been an incredibly difficult time and there's been a lot of people under continuous pressure to perform, and they have done so. So I'm very grateful for that. And I hope you all manage to have a lovely summer, and thank you very much for your contributions today, as always. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I would not have made a good booking.